It's the
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Yellow Gloves podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Cage Warriors. My name's Chris, and today we're going to be breaking down and talking about Cage Warriors 170 in Dublin. I'm really eager, really excited to get into this one. So let's start as we always do with the main event. We'll work our way all the way down to the very first fight on the prelims. So James Sheehan versus Daniel Konrad was our main event for the vacant Cage Warriors welterweight title. The belt was obviously vacated by Yanis Bakar, who has joined the Ultimate Fighter and obviously is no longer part of the Cage Warriors roster. Daniel Konrad, 6-1 as a pro coming into this, a really well-rounded mixed martial artist, very slick submission grappler, a relative unknown in the European MMA circuit, but what we would end up finding out is that again, tremendous matchmaking and tremendous talent ID from Ian Dean to find this guy because he put on one hell of a show as one half of this amazing main event. James Sheehan needs no introduction, of course. Jimbo Slice, 7-3 coming into this fight with wins over guys like Emil Brown, Jamie Richardson, Ollie Santalati, uh, so many, right? Also fought Ian Gary in his third pro fight and also fought Matt Bonner in his pro debut, which is mental. Matt Bonner, of course, former Cage Warriors champion as well. Big one for the Team Ryano fighter in this, and very happy to report that he put in one hell of a performance in this one. Rounds one and two were definitely shaky for James Sheehan. I thought he, looked not well. He looked like he couldn't cope with the pace of Daniel Konrad, and that's really what caught me by surprise. Daniel Konrad's never seen a decision. Obviously, this fight didn't go to the scorecards, but Daniel Konrad's someone that goes in there and gets you out of there in the first round, usually first or second round, or gets got at the same time. James Sheehan is definitely someone who has a proclivity to scrap, but is someone who does his best work as fights go on, in my opinion. And that's pretty much what we got here. Like first round, Daniel Konrad just came like like a bat out of hell. It was insane. Spinning back kick to the body. He cut Sheehan early with an elbow, I believe, just through the guard. Um, Almost at the start of Sheehan's eyebrow, and that was leaking pretty much the whole fight, and only got worse and worse. You thought maybe could we see a doctor stoppage here? Thankfully, we didn't. Both guys exchanging in the pocket early, but Konrad was the wild one in those exchanges. Sheehan tried to be a bit more measured, but Konrad was just throwing everything at him. Sheehan had a nice stiff one too in the first round, and going back, I know there was talk of it being a 10-8 round. I actually thought Sheehan did some really good work in this round, and especially off the counter, a lot of straight shots were landing for him, and he was clocking Konrad as Konrad was coming in. But Konrad's pace and just the sheer volume of what he was throwing really messed Sheehan up in this round. Definitely, the vibe that I got is Sheehan was uncomfortable as the aggressor, and seemed more comfortable on the counter. So he was almost relinquishing all that space for Konrad, and that's where Konrad wanted to be really like happy to slug it out in close proximity. I thought Konrad put on a stellar first round, and going into the second, I thought maybe his gas tank's going to go here because he did look a bit tired in between rounds. But second round was pretty much more of the same, swinging wildly, crowding Sheehan with punches. What I liked in this for Sheehan, again, I feel like we glossed over those first two rounds as he was getting whooped, and actually I don't really think he was. Brilliant short left hook in this as Konrad was coming into range. Straight right for Sheehan was money and was snapping Konrad's head back all the way. But Konrad dropped Sheehan with the left hand, followed him to the ground, and that was probably the biggest moment of the round. Sheehan recovered, reverse position, got back to his feet. The straight right, like I said, was really adding up in the jab. You started to see Konrad's left eye a bit mangled, a bit bloodied, a bit bruised. Both guys swinging in the pocket again. An insane round. Probably my favorite round of the fight, really. Towards the end of the round, Sheehan landed the better shot in a massive exchange between the two of them. Took Konrad down. Konrad tried the gilly and Sheehan slipped out. I had it 2018 Konrad going into round three. So for all the good work I felt Sheehan was doing, Konrad was just yeah, he was outpacing him, outworking him. And again, I just kept thinking like the gas tank's gonna blow at some point. Sheehan's still in this, and Sheehan's just an absolute beast, bleeding all over, bleeding profusely. You've got a guy just throwing strikes at 100 miles per hour, throwing at high volume at a high clip, and he didn't really get overwhelmed. Round three was when Sheehan got back on the horse, in my opinion. Wrestled or tried to wrestle quite a bit in this round. Had the north-south position at one point. Got to half guard, pounded away at Konrad's head. Some really nice elbows. An elbow off the break in the clinch, which I thought was really nice. Konrad tried to keep up with the grappling, and Konrad's a really good grappler. Tried a trip takedown. Sheehan was having none of it. I liked seeing Sheehan isolate the arm, trying to go for the Kimura late in the round, then finding a weird head and arm choke, like pinned up against the fence, and couldn't really get the submission. But you felt that Sheehan was starting to take over. So down 2 rounds in the third, he really started to do some good stuff. And I felt that Konrad was starting to crack just a little. In round four, it was another firefight of a round. So if you felt like the pace was going to drop after round three, after the wrestling and the grappling from Sheehan, you were very, very much mistaken. Konrad tagging Sheehan with the left jab. Sheehan stung him back with a 1-2 down the pipe. Again, what I really want to call out for the Team Rhino fighter here in James Sheehan is that right hand straight down the pipe. Everything that Sheehan threw down the middle of his right hand landed at ease throughout the entire fight. And then Sheehan went back to that grappling, right? Laced the legs of Konrad, pulled him down against the fence with 90 seconds to go, palm to palm, head and arm choke against the fence. Didn't look like he had much space again, like he was really crowded up against that fence, but Sheehan must have one hell of a squeeze on that submission because he choked Daniel Konrad straight to sleep, really quick submission. And there you had it, Jimbo Slice, a new Cage Warriors champion for Ireland, and Team Rhino has a new champ, first one since Neil Seery, dating back to 2012. An amazing gym, genuinely an incredible gym. And the sign of a good MMA gym is when notable names retire, Paul Redman, Neil Seery, and they still stay in the gym to help the new generation coming through. I just love that story. I love what Team Rhino are doing. They went 4-0 on this card, and we'll talk about their fighters later. But James Sheehan, new Cage Warriors welterweight champion. It was a proper firefight, but James Sheehan came out of it right as the man relatively unscathed despite taking a bit of a beating in the first 2 rounds. I really think the fight was more competitive than people were commenting on. Like it felt like it was very much like Konrad was beating the piss out of Sheehan, and definitely he was landing the better strikes. And even objectively, yes, he was beating lumps out of Sheehan, but Sheehan was given as good as he was getting half the time. So very very impressed with him. Just a quick question from Twitter. NDH330 says, "What's next for Jimbo Slice?" It's a really good question. I know people want to go down the UFC route. Not for me. And not because I don't think that James Sheehan deserves it. For me, it's how does he do in more fights in Cage Warriors? Like I want to see him. We've seen him slip against fighters. He's lost to Oban Elliott. He's lost to Ian Machado Gary. Again, a big time difference between those two, like 5 years apart or 4 years apart, and two guys of UFC fame at the moment. But I don't know what I want to see from James Sheehan next. I definitely want to see him defend his belt. Not sure, like the welterweight division is a bit wishy-washy at the moment for Cage Warriors. There's a lot of guys, like I said, Oban Elliott is gone now. Obviously, you have the Judo Gym stuff. Uh, Justin Burlinson might still be kicking around. I don't know what the deal is there. He was supposed to be on Dana White's Contender Series. That fell through due to some visa issues. He was supposed to fight Danny Barlow. Does Burlinson come back? And if he does, you put him in there. I like the idea of Matt Figlak coming in, obviously coming off a win in 2023 as Matt Figlak. Holin's on a bit of not a great streak at the moment. He's lost his last 2 fights, so you probably can't justify that. But it is quite slim pickings at the moment at welterweight. Emil Brown, can you justify him getting a shot after recently losing in his first title shot? I don't think so. We don't have Fleminas anymore, who scored an amazing knockout for KSW on the weekend. It's an interesting one. It really is. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. But for me, I'd love to see Burlinson come back. That would be a great fight, Burlinson Sheehan. If not, then I think Matt Figlak deserves it. He's only lost once in the last 4 years. He's a fairly big name at welterweight, a really good fighter as well. Maybe Matt Figlak. But again, we're matchmaking already for a guy who should be out there celebrating and having a great time. And yeah, James Sheehan really impressed me. I've always been a fan, but I loved that even amongst all of that fire that Konrad was throwing at him, stayed calm, measured, played the role of the sniper, even though it was a battle that was took place in close proximity. It's very impressive, James Sheehan. I think he deserves the belt, deserves to be champ. And for Daniel Konrad, I really hope we see him again because he was fucking awesome in those first few rounds and was winning the fight going into the fourth. So again, congrats to James Sheehan, congrats to Team Ryano. Let's move on to the co-main event. In the co-main event, we had Paul Hughes versus Fabiano Silva at a catch weight of 160 pounds. Paul Hughes had his opponent switch like four different times in the space of 7 days. Massive props to Ian Dean, who managed to find an opponent for Paul Hughes with a few days remaining, before the event started. Fabiano Silva, 34, 15, and 1. 26 of those via finish, or of those wins, of course. Only stopped three times in his career. So again, a massive unknown. I didn't know who the hell he was, but you never know with these guys. Like who have they been beating? How have they been doing it? But when you're finishing a fuckload of people and you're not really getting finished yourself, and you've fought 50 times in your career, then you're probably not a can. you know. A weird one here for Paul Hughes. The last fight of his contract will test free agency. They really wanted to keep this fight on the card, and I wonder if Paul Hughes has already signed with another organization or has given another organization his word and just wanted out of the contract with Cage Warriors. It seems relatively plausible for me. Hearing Paul Hughes talk, we all want to see him in the UFC, and I think it's fucking deplorable that he's not there already. I think he's the best fighter on the Cage Warriors roster and has been for a while. Him and George Hardwick are the two best in my opinion. And yeah, I really think that the UFC have fumbled the bag on numerous occasions with Hughes, and I don't think he's going to end up there. I know I'm kind of glossing over the fight just to talk narrative, but I think PFL, Bellator, PFLator, whatever you want to call it, whatever mess is going on there, I think that that's probably the best landing spot for Hughes from a financial perspective. It seems that he's going to make a decision that is money motivated, which he should. He's a prize fighter. And if the UFC want him, they're going to have to pay up. He's not going to sign on a 10K to show 10K to win. Um, he's got a good head on his shoulders, does Paul Hughes. 11-1 now. He knows he's the hottest prospect, hottest free agent right now, without a doubt. I hope the UFC pay up. I don't think they will. I think it's PFLator for Paul Hughes, and I'm aware that PFLator isn't an actual thing, but I don't know what the hell PFL are doing with Bellator. So until they do something, i.e., get rid of it, or I don't know. Again, I don't know what the fuck they're doing. So it's going to be PFLator for me until they figure it out. But Paul Hughes, obviously, our Cage Warriors featherweight champion. Don't think he'll make featherweight again. I really think at his next promotion that he ends up at, it's going to be 155 for him. Looked amazing against Jan Quayhagens in his last fight. Fought at a catchweight here and just looks comfortable and healthy at 55. And there's not a great deal to talk about in this fight because Paul Hughes finished a man who's only been finished three times in his 50-fight career. Chopping to the lead leg early was Hughes. Fabiano was trying to wrestle quite a bit, but Hughes was good. Like managed to get the underhooks. I think he shot for a single at one point. Hughes was just defending the takedown, getting pressed against the fence a little bit. Out in the open in the striking, Fabiano Silva had nothing for him. Hughes stung him with a knee, and immediately Fabiano Silva shot for a takedown. And you knew more or less that that's the way this fight's going to go. Hughes measuring him up with the left jab, chopping calf kick, digging to the body. I love the elbows and the knees against the fence. And Paul Hughes is amazing. Once he's got a guy hurt against the cage, it reminds me of Poirier. Obviously, not with the same boxing chops, but when they've got a guy kind of stunned against the fence, it's just a barrage of strikes and just like an onslaught of different techniques, elbows, knees, straight punches, rip into the body. That's Paul Hughes's bag, right? And Hughes late in the round, flying knee straight through the guard of Silva, drops the Brazilian, follows him down, and doesn't even bother punching away at his skull. He just goes straight for the elbows. You knew Paul Hughes wanted out of there quick, wanted his big win in front of his home crowd, and that's what he got. He drew the stoppage out of the ref, less than 30 seconds in the round. Will we see Fabiano Silva again? I don't know. Did Fabiano Silva step up on short notice to fight one of the best prospects in MMA, one of the best fighters outside of the UFC, in my opinion? Yes. So props to him. 50 fight veteran, and Paul Hughes just made him look like he just started fighting MMA. Truly, Paul Hughes broke him and shattered him. Just one and done for Paul Hughes. His final fight in the yellow gloves. He's one of those that I don't imagine we'll see here again. Like I really think that that's it for Paul Hughes. I think his career is only up. I can't see him going on like a 2, 3 fight skid that sees him return to the yellow gloves. Maybe one day when he's like in his late 30s and he wants to be like Judo Jim or something like that. Maybe we'll see him, but I think that his prime and his best years are going to be spent outside of the organization. He improves to 11-1 now. Like I keep saying, one of the best fighters in Europe, one of the best non UFC fighters in the world, in my opinion. It's UFC or PFLator next, without a shadow of a doubt for me. Paul Hughes is a bona fide superstar. Anyone who has him will be lucky to have him. Amazing performance from Paul Hughes. Cannot wait to see what he does next. There's going to be a running theme with this card, and it's going to be a lot of prospects getting a lot of awesome finishes. And our next fight is Jer Harris versus Gregory Wamitan. Jer Harris, man, this guy, I've been saying it for a while now. For me, he's one of the best 125 prospects in the world at flyweight. There aren't many that are more fun than Jer Harris. Ran right in the Cage Warriors Academy scene as an amateur, so I've been following him for a while. Fought at IMAF as well in 2019. 8-2 as an amateur, 4-1 as a pro coming into this. Made his professional Cage Warriors debut last year, beating a very game Ryan Hewitt. His opponent here, Gregory Wamitan, I knew nothing about other than the fact that he fought Joanny Scott, who is a rostered Cage Warriors fighter, who won last weekend. Lost that fight, has won 2 on the trot since, representing New Caledonia, which I don't think I've ever seen in MMA, and for all intents and purposes, a very credible BJJ black belt. It definitely showed in this fight because Gregory Wamitan was winning this fight. In the first round, it wasn't an incredibly exciting round, but Wamitan punching to the body on the ground, attacking the Americana, tried to attack the neck at one point. It was a very like professional, measured performance from Wamitan on the ground, really giving Jer Harris a lot of trouble. What I love about Harris is he's always active off his back. Another Team Rhino guy is Jer Harris, and yeah, very active off his back, firing elbows, hunting the armbar. He wasn't pinned down at any point, I wouldn't say. And he was always actively looking to scramble. There were a lot of fun scrambles in this, but Wamitan definitely took the first round. Second round, Wamitan had the double leg within seconds of the round starting, and I thought maybe Jay Harris might be still a bit too wet behind the ears potentially, and he's come up against a guy who might be better than we think. But where I think this fight kind of changed for me was the Harris landed the up kick on Wamitan while they were grappling in round two. I think that gave Wamitan a bit of pause on the ground. You had him shooting the naked double in the middle of the cage again. Harris wise to that. Then we had the illegal knee, and that's where the fight really changed. So Wamitan knee to the grounded opponent, which was of course Jay Harris. You all know my opinion on this stuff. I think it should be legalized, and I will always say that, and I'll scream it till the cows come home. I don't really think that's a move that should be outlawed in MMA. I think if you're, I don't think Jay Harris was stalling. Actually, I think he was trying to build back to his feet, but as a stalling technique that fighters sometimes use, and just 1 inch of a finger on the canvas means that you're grounded. I don't know, just seems a bit shitty for me, but it is what it is. It was an illegal move. Referee didn't take any points, but this is where the fight kind of changed. I felt and the momentum shifted. Wamitan again just relentlessly wrestling, relentlessly trying to get Jay Harris down. In doing so, in Wamitan trying to get him down, Harris locked up the modified guillotine and didn't let it go. What I loved is that it was an unorthodox guillotine that he had in, and Wamitan is again a BJJ black belt, and for all intents and purposes looked awesome on the ground in this fight. But what I loved was that Wamitan was trying to rotate out of the submission because again it wasn't like a traditional guillotine. It was something modified, more of like a almost like a ninja choke kind of. Um, but yeah, Wamitan was trying to rotate to get out of the position, and Jay Harris rotating with him, rotating with him, rotating with him, kind of like an anaconda. Just some craziness that Jay Harris did. He'll have to explain it. Even me as a grappler, I would struggle to explain what modified submission he had in, but he drew the tap out of Gregory Wamitan in the second round. Very impressive for Jer Harris. It's nice to see him face some adversity. It's nice to see him not kind of roll people over. Really good matchmaking here. We got to see a test of his ground game. And what I loved about it, above all else, is that despite losing the first round, we didn't see Harris get in his feelings or get in his head. Um, Straight back on the horse in round two, got taken down within seconds, still didn't let it affect him. He knew that if he gets his finish, if he gets his kill shot or his choke, he's going to put Wamitan out, and that's what he did. Jay Harris is now 5-1 at 125 pounds, guys. There are very few prospects that I'm more excited about than Jay Harris. I think Ireland have like a big one on their hands. There's another guy on this card that I believe they're quite blessed with, but for me, Jay Harris, the GTA selector, we're going to see this guy in a lot of fun fights, but we're going to see this guy probably go right to the top as well. Becky McAleenan versus Ville Mankinen is the next fight that we'll talk about. Ville Mankinen missed weight initially, had his 2 hour grace period, and managed to make weight. Mankinen made his debut last year in November, lost to Milad Ahadi, who's one of my favourite fighters at 145 pounds. But for all intents and purposes, Mankinen is a very fun grappler out of Finland. If you guys know one thing about me, Finnish grapplers, Welsh grapplers, that's kind of like my proclivities in MMA. I think that there's some amazing grapplers coming out of both of those countries, and we'll talk about two of them today. Deki Makalinen, obviously another really fun grappler, coming off an awesome armbar finish last year after almost 13 months out of the cage, has been in Cage Warriors for years. A super fun grappler. But one thing that I wrote in my notes, and I always say about Deki Makalinen, he's an awesome grappler, but the guy's got hands, and people don't really respect that. And I think they should, and I think this fight's a good example of that because Deki Makalinen, I'll just talk about the finish because I thought it was wonderful. Like gorgeous straight left to open the combination up, elbowed over the top, winged a few hooks to the body, and then got the uppercut in there, just battered Ville Mankinen against the cage. Before that, it was primarily like a grappling fight, I would say. Like Mankinen, in the first round, he was getting Makalinen down, but he wasn't doing anything. I scored at 10-9 Makalinen in the first. He was active off his back. Fair, he spent 5 minutes on his back. But what I think is also fair is that the guy who was striking was him, and the guy who was attempting submissions was him. Butterfly guard was active for Makalinen, trying to escape, trying to, create a scramble. Had the armbar attempt, had the triangle attempt, had the elbows off his back. I scored the first round for him. Second round was the exact same, like slicing him up with elbows off his back, hips going high to secure the armbar or the triangle. Mankinen wanted to wrestle. He didn't really want to finish Makalinen. Makalinen wanted the finish by any means necessary, and I'm glad he got it with his hands. Put some more respect to Makalinen striking because this guy's pure fun whenever he's in there. But I hate that he gets pigeonholed as just a grappling guy. He can also strike his ass off, and you saw that in this fight. An amazing win for Makalinen, two in a row for him now. Keep booking him, Cage Warriors, and we don't need to wait for Dublin every year. Let's see him with a bit more frequency, and let's see him against some more fun fighters because this is a guy that you put him in there, and he's almost always guaranteed to either have one of the highlight finishes of the night or have one of the fights of the night. So props to Deki Makalinen, 9 wins now in his career. Can't wait to see him again. The opening fight on the main card was my personal pick for not fight of the night, but a fight where I felt there might be a big upset, and it was Rory Evans versus Taka Mhandu. I know that my regular listeners, you'll all be rolling your eyes. Here comes Chris talking about Rory Evans. But guys, I keep telling you, look, and no one listens. Rory Evans is a G. Like Cage Warriors vet, one of the best bantamweights in the UK. Well, maybe not one of the best bantamweights in the UK, but one of the most entertaining bantamweights in the UK. One of the most dangerous game bantamweights in the UK. Okay, he's not got the record, and he was 6-6 coming into this. Okay, maybe he's not gonna go to fucking UFC or he's not gonna go and do these amazing things. But what Rory Evans is doing is putting on amazing fights, is being an incredibly fun kill or be killed type of fighter. And you'll always run the risk, like you put a prospect against Rory Evans, and Rory Evans could dead them. And that's kind of what happened here. No disrespect to Taka Mhandu, of course, one of the more exciting prospects out of Ireland, but he's not really blown me away since joining Cage Warriors. Looks really good last year with his win over Alexander Sashapirev, but lost in Dublin to Grant Ogborn, lost again in this one. Undefeated as an amateur, which is why he had a bit of hype. He's got the frame. He's at 135. He's got all the tools to succeed. Probably going to be a bit of a slow burn for Taka. But Rory Evans, I picked him to win. And I don't, you guys know, I don't usually get into picks, but I felt, okay, Taka Mandu's got all the range advantage. I don't think that Taka still knows how to use that distance to his advantage. Rory Evans at the weigh-ins was on his tippy toes, right? Like making a joke about how tall Taka Mandu is. But what did Rory Evans do? Immediately started the fight, double jab to close the distance, tripling up on the jab, throwing the feint just to get within distance. Taka Mhandu didn't have much for him. Rory Evans dives in on a single leg, gets the body lock takedown. Mhandu was trying to use the fence to reverse Evans on the ground. Evans just smartly transitioned into side mount, applying the pressure to prevent Mhandu from bumping off. Mhandu did get back to his feet, but there was only a few seconds left. It was a 10-9 round for Rory Evans, and I thought that that's pretty much how the fight would go. But in the second round, Rory Evans double leg takedown immediately, climbs to Taka Mandu's back, gets the head and arm choke, but Mhandu escapes, which was impressive. And then still on the ground, Evans just started firing away at Taka Mhandu, had him belly down, just smashing at his head with clobbering strikes, and the referee was forced to step in. I say it all the time, Rory motherfucking Evans, one of my favorite fighters on the roster. And I tweeted this after the fight. He's a tough bastard. He's an insanely fun grappler. He just killed Taka Mhandu's range advantage with ease and tramped him on the ground. A big win for the Welshman, a big win for Richard Shaw's team. I love what those guys are doing. 2 years I've been running this pod. I've been watching these guys for much longer, of course. I've been covering and chatting about UK MMA for bloody hell, who knows, like many years at this point, in the 10 plus, and the what Richard Shaw's doing over there, and the grapplers he's bleeding through. Rory Evans, like I said, he's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, though he should be. People will scoff at the record. People will turn their nose up at him. Cage Warriors will keep matching him up against guys who are 5-1, 6-2, 6-0, and every once in a while he's going to beat the brakes off one of your favorite prospects. That's just the Rory Evans experience. We'll rattle through the prelims now. We had some really good fights on this one, a lot of finishes. Solomon Simon versus Yohan McKenzie. Solomon Simon, boy, oh boy, there are real deals, and then there's Solomon Simon. Like Ireland's got a mega prospect on their hands at 145 pounds. We talk about amateur fights a lot on this pod, and you have to, right? You can't talk about Cage Warriors and a promotion that has an amateur scene, an academy scene, and not be invested in the amateur side of things. And Solomon Simon, for all intents and purposes, is what has one of those amateur careers that I think is the most underrated amateur career you can have. He went 10-8 as an amateur. A lot of folks will look at that, and genuinely they will look at it and they'll be like, "Oh, this guy is okay." And now he's 4-0 since turning pro, and he's beat some really good people. And Yohan McKenzie's one of them. Like McKenzie's an awesome Welsh grappler. 3-0 coming into this fight, 9 submission wins across both amateur and pro. Another guy with a long AMI career. But back on the Solomon Simon point, because I'm really passionate about this. People will turn their nose up at that. 18 fight amateur career to go 10-8. You think you're going to get a middling fighter, maybe. But anyone who's watched the amateur scene, and the amateur MMA's like really exploded over the last 10 years. Solomon Simon is a Team Ryano guy, and I think it's really important to keep that in mind. Like that's a gym that really cares about its fighters. To have 18 amateur fights and then go pro, that means that when you go in there as a pro, you're going to be fighting dudes who are maybe having their fourth fight, their fifth fight. Maybe they haven't had an amateur career. And you're going to go in there and you're going to break people and you're going to smash them because you've dealt with losses. So you're not really tentative. You're not really afraid to go in there. You've probably been finished at some point, which Solomon Simon has. You just go in there with a better understanding of the cage, a better understanding of cage craft, a better understanding of how to break down your opponents during the fight, like in fight breakdowns. Like that's really important. And Solomon Simon, for me, the reason I say he's a mega prospect, you might not have thought much of him coming through as an amateur, but look at him now. 4-0 as a pro, all four via finish, and he's not going in there and blowing the doors off anyone. He's not finished anyone in the first round. He's got a third round TKO, a second round knockout, a third round submission, and in this fight, a second round submission over a really, really good submission grappler. In round one, it could have been a first round finish for Solomon Simon. He does drop McKenzie with a big right hand. In the second round, though, that's where Solomon Simon really starts to do his best work, doubling up on the jab, check hook with the left hand as McKenzie steps in, straight right hand snapping McKenzie's head back. What I love about Solomon Simon as a striker is that he's always circling, he's always moving laterally, but he's always striking when he does it. So it's not like, okay, I'm going to pivot to the left. It's pivot to the left, here comes a left hook, or pivot to the left, straight right down the pipe. There's always something behind all of his movements. He's always active, doesn't waste a move. If Solomon Simon was in the UFC or something like that, he'd be one of those guys that you see a countless a barrage of videos and breakdowns and analysis of his movement, his footwork, and his striking. He's a brilliant striker. And this fight, it was the striking that got it done for him, even though he won via submission. What does he do? How does he get the finish? It's a really simple one. McKenzie throws a really lazy kick, and Solomon Simon sweeps him to the ground, gets into half guard, elbows away, uses the elbow to transition to mount. With that mount, works his way to the back with 30 seconds to go, and draws the tap with, on the final second, it was basically a buzzer beater submission for Solomon Simon. Uh, just tremendous, really. 4-0 now. Like I said, I think he's, for me, again, Team Ryano are blessed right now, and it's an amazing gym, genuinely an amazing gym. And Solomon Simon and Jet Harris might be like the crown jewels of the gym, in all honesty. What's next for Solomon Simon? I don't know. And I don't think they should start matching him up against big names at 145 pounds. I like the slow build. I like what they're doing with him. Keep letting this guy work. Keep him active. Let's see him fight a couple of times a year, and I think that we'll see some good stuff out of him. Elsewhere on the prelims, we had Enrico Di Gagni versus Scott Harvey. Scott Harvey undefeated as a pro, 3-0. Fought Matt Elliott also on this card, and this was a nice prospect clash. Enrico Di Gagni is a guy that I really like. Went 12-2 as an amateur, turned pro, and hasn't looked back since. 4-1 coming into this big decision win over Alessandro Giordano last year in his Cage Warriors debut. This fight wasn't incredibly entertaining until the third round, so I had it even going into the third. I thought Di Gagni took the second round, Harvey took the first, but in the third round, Di Gagni just completely his gas tank just depleted massively, and Harvey clocked him with a right hand over the top, left hook, uppercut in the pocket for the Irishman. He did his best work in the pocket. Left hook against the fence just wobbled Di Gagni massively. It's the best round of the fight. I scored it 29-28 for Scott Harvey. 4-0 now as a pro. This was his Cage Warriors debut, and I'm very excited to see what he does next. Ryan Shelley versus Callum Parker was a pretty fun one. I thought this would be fireworks. Callum Parker, obviously one half of the absolute barn burner of a fight last year with Luke Riley. Just a fast, crisp boxer, riding a three-fight losing streak. But this guy's a good example that records don't tell the full story. He's a very good fighter. And Ryan Shelley, of course, coming off a couple of losses, really with a 2023 to forget. Lost his title eliminator to Tobias Harila via a really devastating finish. Tried to bounce back against Geordie Backers and got submitted. This was a big one for him, and he won it really by any means necessary. It was the wrestling that did it for him. Grappled really well in this fight, got some nice mat returns, slam takedowns. I scored it 29-28 for him. I thought Parker took the second, and Parker's really fun, guys. That the fact that he's on a four-fight skid, the fact he's 2-4, a lot of people will turn their nose up at him. But I'm telling you, this guy's going to have a really fun career, and that record will even itself out in due time. He's had some really tough fights, like to fight Ryan Shelley and fight Luke Riley already as a 6-fight pro is mental. But props to Ryan Shelley getting the job done in this one. Saw his path to victory, saw that it was the path of least resistance, and the Team KF guy went in there and got back in the win column. I can't hate it in any way. He was impressive, and props to him. I'm sure that we'll see Ryan Shelley in some bigger fights soon. He needed to get back in the win column, and this was the fight to do it in. Eimar Darcy versus Jenny Line was the next fight on the card. Guys, I'm not gonna kind of sugarcoat this. Jenny Line had no business being on this card, and it just felt outright negligent seeing her in action. Eimar Darcy, obviously, making her pro debut here, started fighting only a couple of years ago. Decent record as an amateur, 5-2. Jenny Line, 0-3 as a pro, including her amateur career, came into this fight on a 7-fight skid, 6 of those losses via finish. Even Eimar Darcy looked sad that she had to, not sad, but she just looked confused that she had to beat on this woman. All it took was 58 seconds of work for Eimar Darcy. What can you say here? Punching off the break really good, snuck in 2 straight shots to the body, and the third one really broke Jenny Line, dropped her with it. Darcy followed up with a few shots. Referee stepped in and stopped the fight. For a promotion that's got really good matchmaking and really fun, compelling matchmaking, I was a bit disappointed in this one. I get that you got to build people, and I know that it's Eimar Darcy's pro debut. But there are other fighters making their pro debut, like Jamie Abbott-Bissett on this card, and he had a really like fun and interesting opponent. At 125 pounds, there's a lot of female fighters out there, and we could have seen Eimar Darcy against someone more compelling. But for Eimar, she'll take it, winning in your pro debut via knockout 58 seconds into the fight. Not a lot of people get to say that, so props to her. I'm sure they'll throw her on another Dublin card when they next go there. But for Jenny Line, I don't know. I hate to tell fighters to pack it in. And 0-4, you've still got a lot of your career left. But when you look at the amateur stuff, when you look at the fact that she's lost by a finish 6 times in her last 7, maybe not the career for her. Tomasz Janowski versus Ciaran Brady was the next fight on this card. A really fun one here. Ciaran Brady, a guy making his professional debut, went 11-2 as an amateur. A really slick grappler and a champion at amateur level as well, which always adds a bit more hype to the fighter. Janowski still looking for his first win as a pro, so he was 0-1 coming into this, and a guy who was undefeated as an amateur. So really fun, compelling matchmaking here, unlike the Darcy Line fight. Ciaran Brady and Zanowski looked amazing on the ground, like really awesome scrambles, really awesome takedowns from both guys. Brady's wrestling and the speed on his wrestling was really, really impressive for me. Just the timing on his takedowns, how quickly he was just triggering those takedowns. Stanowski, awesome off his back, tried to tie up the armbar. Even Brady had an armbar attempt of his own, and elbowing away at Stanowski's head. Stanowski was like headbutting Brady's punches, which I thought was really funny as well, just trying to break his hand basically. Both guys went hammer and tongs in this one. Some awesome grappling exchanges, but the guy who gets it done is Ciaran Brady, because Stanowski on the feet goes for a spinning back elbow. Brady uses the momentum off that shot to take Stanowski down. Stanowski tries to get the gilly. Brady goes to side control to escape the submission, jumps on the back, and draws just a super quick tap from Stanowski. Referee was in the way, so you didn't even see the tap, but all you saw was a frame of Brady putting his arm around Stanowski's neck, and then the next frame was the referee waving his arm, saying the fight's over. Awesome pro debut for Ciaran Brady. He's a guy who I'm very excited to see how his career progresses and what the next step is for him. Zanowski, I'm sure we'll see him again. Really fun fight that at 135 pounds. At welterweight, we had Ben Petches Kelly versus Dara Ward. Dara Ward came like 3.5 pounds underweight in this fight, weighed in at 166, so might have overshot the weight cut, I think, and probably cut a bit more than he should have. But Dara Ward's a guy that I'm really high on. Obviously, won in his debut last year, in his pro debut under Cage Warriors. Very accomplished guy on the ground and had a dominant AMI run too. Ben Petches Kelly, next gen MMA guy, You know what you're going to get with these guys. Almost finished his opponent last year, ended up getting finished himself. Really good amateur background, rarely sees the scorecard. And so you knew that this one wasn't going to last very long. And it didn't. Ward came out in this fight on fire. Immediately in the first round, blitzing Petrus Kelly with straight shots. Left hook backed Petrus Kelly up against the fence. And he got the body lock takedown immediately. Did Dara Ward. Laced up the legs of Petrus Kelly, crawled to mount, used the knee on stomach or knee on belly to transition to the back, baited the Sulo stretch. I don't think he was ever going for it, but you might as well fish for something while you're on someone's back. And I think it disguised a bit from the neck attack. I think he had Petrus Kelly thinking about one thing, and he went for the most obvious one, which was the rear naked choke. Looked like a crank on the jaw more than a rear naked choke, but Ben Petrus Kelly went to sleep, and yeah, tapped and then went to sleep like within that split second. Dara Ward 2-0 now. Very fun fighter. Another prospect, another undefeated prospect for the Irish MMA guys. Let's see what Dara Ward does next, because I think that he could be a pretty fun grappler at 170 pounds. And now we'll cover off the last three fights, which was we'll start with Valentino Riva versus Matt Elliott. Matt Elliott, obviously, someone who has fought in the yellow gloves before, coming back after 2 years of inactivity, which is always could go one way or the other. Lost to Ryan Shelley in his last appearance, but has a win over Scott Pedersen in the yellow gloves, who's a guy who's been around for a while. 2-1 as a pro is Matt Elliott. Valentino Riva lost via horrendous knockout last year to Giuseppe Mastrogiacomo in his Cage Warriors debut. Fairly highly rated Italian prospect from everything I've read and seen. 3-2 as a pro coming into this one, but it was all Matthew Elliott for me in this fight. Matthew Elliott. What I loved about Elliott was the body lock takedowns in this one, and that's the way that he got the finish. Body lock takedown, transition straight into mount, got the head and arm choke, put a tremendous amount of pressure into it. Really just went full in with the shoulder pressure, with the hips. Lovely little sub against the fence as well. Didn't have much space really to move. Managed to get the submission out of Riva. Great to see Elliott back in the win column. Great to see him back fighting as well. 2 years out is a very long time, especially for a fighter who hasn't had many fights. And I'm sure that's been eating away at him. But it's a great performance. Valentino Riva did all right in the first round, but kept overcommitting on the strikes, and Elliott was just exposing him with 1-2s and hooks through the guard. Impressive from Matt Elliott, truly. 3-1 now, and I hope we see some more activity from him in the future. Our other women's fight on this card was Jennifer Triolo versus Sinead Newland. Newland obviously lost last year to Kate Bassick at Cage Warriors 163, and was the favourite going into that fight. She was the favourite coming into this one against 0-4 professional fighter in Triolo, who has fought in Brave and Combate, so she hasn't fought in no name organisations. She has a kickboxing background, and this was supposed to be Newland getting back on the win back in the win column, and it didn't happen for her. Jennifer Triolo takes the split decision 29-28. I'll lay my cards down right now. I've seen a lot of people shitting on Lee Newland. I thought she won the fight. I really did. 29-28, I had it. I thought she took the first two rounds. Round one is the swing round. It was super close, don't get me wrong, and I'm not here to scream robbery. But I thought that Triolo's best work was in round three. But I do think Triolo's best work was in round three. And in round one, Ninulan for me was doing the better work. Obviously, Triolo had a jab, I think, and had an elbow that cut Ninulan up. But for me, I think Ninulan did the better work in round one. Definitely did the better work in round two. Obviously, 0-2 now, and a lot of people are down on her. I've seen some pretty shitty comments online saying that she should retire. MMA's not for her. She lost to an 0-4 can. Sometimes guys like watch more MMA. Just because someone's 0-4 doesn't mean that they're the worst fighter in the world. Sometimes they are, but other times they might just have had tough matchmaking. They might not have really figured it out yet. For Trioro, a kickboxing background, transitions to MMA, you're going to learn, and you're going to take some losses. She actually looked decent in this fight, but Ninulan, I think she should just continue at it, keep going at it. Maybe not in the yellow gloves, maybe not in Cage Warriors. I think she should probably fight a bit more regionally. get a few wins up and get her confidence back. She's not a bad fighter, but yeah, not a good loss to take, and not a good look against someone who is 0-4. And last but not least, our prelim opener, which was between Jamie Abbott-Bissett and Pavel Jezierski. Jamie Abbott-Bissett making his pro debut. So was Jezierski as well. 10-3 as an amateur, though, was Jezierski. A lot of regional AMI experience. No real, no IMAF or anything like that. Abbott-Bissett, another guy like Solomon Simon, 18 fights as an amateur. Lost his last 3 as an amateur. Turns pro in this one. Former IMAF competitor is Abbott-Bissett, and he had one of the best performances on the card for me. Pavel Jezierski is really fun, and I think that he's going to have an awesome career, in all honesty, and I hope we see him again. But Abbott-Bissett was brilliant in this fight. In round 1, he was happy to wrestle. Huge slam takedown. When things, didn't quite go his way on the ground, using the guillotine to wrestle back up to more advantageous positions, passing to side control. Even when Jezierski was attacking the armbar, Abbott-Bissett was there, smart, cognizant, knowing exactly how to defend every single position. On the feet, it was really both guys just kicking. Abbott-Bissett had probably the best calf kick of the two because he just spun Jezierski with one of them. I just felt that Abbott-Bissett did the better work in round 1. The slam takedown as well has got to count for something. In round 2, where Jamie Abbott-Bissett got his finish, Jezierski was kicking high and trying to blitz off the high kick, but Abbott-Bissett, awesome, so sharp on the counter, straight right to the body, rip into the body over and over. Jezierski was covering up and surviving, but you could tell it was starting to add up, and Abbott-Bissett was gaining more confidence in his strikes. The right hand landed for Abbott-Bissett, especially when thrown as a straight as well. Like the right hand was money, but a straight right hand for him was clobbering Jezierski. And then for the finishing sequence, Jezierski goes for a double leg. Abbott-Bissett underhook to prevent it, lands 2 massive knees, turns Jezierski, digs to the body with a few hooks, knees again, goes back to the body, and then the right hand over the top drops Jezierski, and the follow-up shots were enough to draw the stoppage. That's how you have a pro debut against a really game opponent. You show all of the facets of MMA. Had the wrestling, looked good, defended, these Hail Mary submissions from Jezierski really well. And then on the feet, great combinations, slick, quick, confident, excellent performance. And Team Ryano go 4-0 on this card. Amazing for them, amazing for their fighters. They've got some brilliant prospects coming through. They've got a champion now as well. Very impressive for that gym. And that puts a bow on Cage Warriors 170. Another success in Dublin. A lot of fun fights, a lot of awesome prospects that we're seeing them build through. And I'd love to see them put on more cards in Ireland and really give these folks more shine. Maybe we'll see them back in Dublin again this year. We've got one more card in April in Glasgow, Cage Warriors 171. I'm so excited. Some of my favourite prospects in the UK are from Scotland, and I'm really hyped for this one. And the fight I'm most excited for is Chris Bungard versus Dimitri Gerlin. I think that's going to be a scrap for the ages. Carlo Pedersoli's back as well. You've got Reese McEwen versus Cameron Else, which I'm very hyped for. Yayan Davies, one of my favourite grapplers. Jan Quay-Higgins is back. Jack Eglin versus Dan Deutsch. Like Michael Blair versus Deck Dean. What more could you want? Scott Malone versus Nicholas LeBlond. Naglis Kanisauskas is back. Sean Clancy Jr., one of my favourite prospects. Yeah, it's going to be a fun one in Glasgow and a lot of fights on that card. I mean, it's looking like 18, 20 fights, which I'm not usually a fan of, but for podcasting purposes, because then I end up talking for ages, but excited for it just to see some good fights. Thank you very much for listening. As always, if you've listened this long, please consider retweeting, sharing, posting on Instagram, reviewing the podcast, leaving a like on YouTube, wherever it is that you're listening to this on, or wherever you see that it's being posted. Anything you can do to boost the signal of the pod would be much appreciated. But I will catch you folks in the next one. Thank you very much.